Thank you so much, Dr. Matambo, for joining us. And this is going to be a very interesting conversation. A lot of people are talking about what's happening, with regards to the Sino-Metal case. So we're happy to have you join us to have a conversation about this. So to start off, could you quickly maybe share with our listeners in terms of why is the government of Zambia siding with Sino-Metal? What is, influencing the Zambian government to actually side with the company? We know that the government has also dismissed the report by Drisset, which did an independent assessment of the damage. We want to understand, a political perspective. Is the presidential election campaign that's coming up going to have any effect to this? Can you help us unpack this issue?
Thank you very much. First of all, I'm really honored to be featured on this podcast. What has been happening in Zambia should not really be surprising. It is perhaps surprising to some people because it is happening so less than a year before a general election in August 2026. But why is the Zambian government seemingly siding with Sino-Metals and NFC? Because even the non-ferrous corporation has also been sued by the 150 litigants from Zambia. The reasons are pragmatic on the part of the Zambian government. Of China's investments in Zambia, about 88% are dedicated towards mining and related activities. So there is a lot that is that the Chinese have actually invested in Zambia's mines. And you would also understand the background that happened around 2008 when the global crisis, the global recession kicked in. Some of Zambia's mines had been abandoned for years, and the Chinese actually stepped in to start operating those mines. At that stage, China was seen as a savior, as offering Zambia respite, because up to today, more than 80% of Zambia's foreign revenue is generated through mining, mostly copper mining. And that is where the Chinese are heavily invested in. So to lose a partner of such magnitude would be a body blow to Zambia's economy. But obviously, as we go on in our discussion, we're going to talk about the political implications. But from an economic standpoint, it makes sense for the Zambian government to actually side with Sino-Metals, because who's going to step in when Sino-Metals is forced out of the country? So they are partly calculating it from that particular perspective. Just to add one last point there, Obert. The farmers that are suing Sino-Metals and NFC have sued them for 80 billion. To put that in context, Zambia is an economy with GDP of $25 billion. So that is just the context to put it in. And secondly, there was an undertaking by the Zambian government to commit Sino-Metals to about 1.5 million kwacha. Now, that is a laughable amount of money. Now they are claiming that they have actually compensated farmers to the tune of 14 million kwacha. Now, again, if you look at the damage that was done, 14 million kwacha is less than 67,000 United States dollars. So it is really a drop in an ocean.
Maybe two things. We raised something that we have talked with my colleague Joe and Eric. Has there been any other assessment that has been done besides the Drisset assessment? And who has done it? And what does it tell us, if any, if you are aware of it?
So from the government standpoint and from independent assessors, nothing has really been done statistically to pin down what the damage could amount to. And it is, I understand that point, because it is actually very difficult to quantify the damage, because a lot of people actually are looking at Chambishi and the damage that was done to the Kafue River. But the damage was possibly had the potential to reach more of Zambia, because Zambia is a population of about 20 million. The number of people who live on what is termed as the Kafue Basin, the people who are somewhat affected by the downstream effects of that pollution, were about 12 million Zambians. So how do you a lot of people are looking at farmers who are more directly involved, and these are people who live in the Chambishi area. But most of Zambians, especially in the Kafue basin, rely on the Kafue waterway because it is actually the biggest source of potable water for most Zambians. So let us not only look at crop and animal life. Let us also look at people who depend on that on that waterway. Just to add one last point there, even when the government is rebutting the reports that have been done, they are not offering any cogent statistics that anyone can latch onto and say, okay, here is the ground on which the Zambian government is rebutting the report. So that is quite strange from the Zambian government.
So given this economic context that you have given us, the relationship between Zambia and China, and what it means for a lot of people that are potentially impacted by this, let's talk about the politics. Why would the president, or through his ministry responsible for environment, side with a company? I think in a normal world, one would expect that the president would have said, perhaps, can we let independent assessments be done before we can make a decision, to take sides? How does that play out? What is the feeling within Zambians around, how government has handled this?
That's a very important question because it then brings in the complexity and the multi-layered nature of Zambia's relationship with China. Since this relationship was established on the 29th of October 1964, for about 30 years, it was only state actors who shaped the narrative of Zambia's relationship with China. It had blemishes, just like any relationship. It had blemishes, it had a lot of shortcomings, but they were kind of swept under the carpet, or they were decided behind closed doors at the level of the state. The Chinese that came to Zambia were Chinese who came at the behest of the Chinese government. Some of them came as diplomats. Some of them came to work on multinational corporations, and they had to go back to China at the end of their contracts. And then some of them were medical personnel. So these are people that came under the auspices of the Chinese government. But from around 1998 or towards the year 2000, we have seen that the relationship has become multi-pronged, because we have seen that there are Chinese entrepreneurs, Chinese investors who are coming to Zambia out of their own volition, not at the behest of the Chinese government. So that has actually opened up a new avenue from which Zambia's relationship with China could be analyzed. And that is the avenue of people-to-people relations, and that is the avenue that has been called track 2 diplomacy by some theorists. And at that level, China's relationship with Zambia is not as positive as the Zambian state presents it to be. So there is actually a discrepancy even today following this lawsuit that we started with right now. In as much as the government is siding with Sino-Metals and non-ferrous corporation, the feeling amongst ordinary Zambians, especially those who are adversely impacted by this mining spillage, is that of a China that is predatory, is that of a China that has a cavalier attitude, so to say, to the safety of not only ordinary Zambians, but even Zambian workers working in Chinese mines. So there is a discrepancy, so to say, between the sentiment that is coming from the government and the sentiment that is coming from ordinary Zambians.
So with those sentiments that are coming out from ordinary Zambians and those that are directly affected, how do you think, with the election coming up, this will play out for Mr. HH?
There is actually historical precedent to that, Obert. I will take you back to what happened in 2005, again before a crucial election year of 2006. Dozens of Zambian workers perished at a mining explosive manufacturing company in the same area, by the way, in Chambishi area, the same area where this disaster that we started with happened. Dozens, more than 50, I think, Zambian workers died. Between 48 and 52, the numbers haven't really been pinned down. So what happened was that the opposition party of that day, the main opposition, it was not the main opposition at that time, led by a populist leader, Michael Sata, very charismatic leader, latched onto that disaster to rally support from the rest of the Zambians about the dangers of Zambia's relationship with China. And guess what? Within 5 years, his party had been formed, I think, in 2001. It only got 3% of the votes in 2001. By 2006, using anti-Chinese sentiment, Michael Sata grew his support from 3% to almost 30%, to above 20%. And became the main opposition. So it is quite telling at the moment that the Zambian government does not use that precedent. And guess what? In the Copperbelt province and in Lusaka province, where Chinese investment is highly visible, the Patriotic Front actually dominated 90% of parliamentary votes in those provinces. So you can tell how important the issue.
So from where you stand, this incident is potential political implications for the upcoming elections. When is Zambia's elections?
In August of 2026. So it has considerable political ramifications actually for the Zambian government, especially on the Copperbelt province, because the Copperbelt province is one of Zambia's most populous provinces. The Copperbelt province and Lusaka alone add to a considerable percentage of Zambia's voting power. And it is also an urbanized area. And if you know anything about Zambian African politics, in urban areas, voters are more inclined to vote for the opposition than the incumbent, because rural areas tend to vote most especially on ethnic lines. But urban areas tend to vote mostly on lines that are pragmatic, on economic lines, and they usually tend to vote mostly for the opposition. So this could actually have a political ramifications, and the government of Zambia would be better served actually to take the issue very seriously and not just to dismiss the lawsuit by saying, well, we compensated people with 14 million. Which people are compensated by that 14 million? Because clearly the 176 litigants that are now suing Sino-Metals and NFC either do not receive that money, or they think it was just a pittance that cannot really add up to the compensation that is needed. If you look at the scale of the damage, and I actually gave a broader picture of the scale of the damage rather than what the numbers that have just been brought up by a lot of people.
Right. I want to come to the Zambian judicial system, or the legal system. Its independence and the potential to deliver justice for the affected people. We know from some previous cases involving multinational mining companies that have been litigated outside Zambia. For instance, the case for Kabwe community, the lead poison case that had to be litigated in South Africa. We know of the Vedanta case that had to be litigated in the UK. From where you stand, is there any prospects of justice being delivered by the courts in this case, and also touching on the 80 billion figure, which I don't know from where you stand. I mean, this seems to be quite a ridiculous amount of money, I'm keen to hear your comments on that.
Let me start from where you ended. When it comes to the 80 billion figure, it is unrealistic, but it is symbolic, and it is important though. Politically, it is very important, especially if you try to compute the damage that would have been done for the rest of the country. But it is highly symbolic, and it is there just to keep up the noise and the pressure on Sino-Metals, on non-ferrous cooperation under the Zambian government. I do not see, even if we were to find the most impartial and independent court with the most credible jurists, I do not think they would really entertain that figure. They might entertain some form of compensation, but to entertain a figure of 80 billion amongst a section of farmers in a country that has a compound GDP of below 30 billion is frankly unrealistic. But the symbolism of it all cannot be dismissed because of the important political ramifications that I spoke about. Now, let us come back to the Zambian judicial system. Yes, as you have noted, a lot of our cases, a lot of high-ranking cases have actually been litigated outside the Zambian government. I'm sitting in Johannesburg right now, about 50 kilometers where the body of our former president is lying. And the case is being litigated in a South African court. The case against our second president, the corruption case against our second president, Chiluba, was decided in London. So that just shows not only that there have been a lot of Zambian cases carried out outside the jurisdiction of Zambia, it is also somehow an indictment of our judicial system. And it is because our judicial system is politically susceptible. And historically, that has proven the case, even the legislature itself. So, yes, we have all these organs of state, but we have a highly centralized political system in Zambia, centralized, by the way, in the executive. And even in the executive itself, it is centralized in the person of the president, who has untrammeled powers to appoint people to his cabinet. And that also has a corrosive impact on the independence of the judicial system. It has, obviously, there have been cases where the judicial system has actually surprised us in Zambia, such as in 2016, when leading up to 2021, when Edgar Lungu wanted to run, as it ended up running, being voted for a third time as president. There were some dissenting voices from Zambia's high courts. So there have been all those cases, but in most of the times, the judicial system, especially the high courts, are usually packed by people who sympathize with the president, who actually appoints them anyway. So there is that as well. So yes, it is susceptible to political pressure from the executive. And because of that, I cautiously praise the Zambian judicial system.
No, thank you so much, Matambo. I think these are very interesting, insights that we have been having, these conversations with our colleagues, and we also wanted to get, the political perspective to say, how would this play out? And right there, you laid out that, Copperbelt is one of the most populous, provinces in the country. That is, the potential to tilt the balance of power when it comes to HH's re-election in August next year. Thank you so much for these interesting insights. Thank you to our listeners, and look out for more. This is China Global South Project. Thank you.